Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman, and this is episode number 553. Thanks for joining me today. We love having you listen, and we've been getting such great feedback on the show. So thank you so much for all of your support and for your reviews on iTunes and telling your friends about the show and all of that good stuff. We really appreciate it, and that's what keeps us going. Booking great celebrity guests and thought leaders and people who really know what's going on. We've got some great shows coming up for you. On Wednesday, our next episode, not this one, we have a presidential candidate. I'm going to let you guess who it is. And of course, we already had we've had, 4 presidential candidates on the show now, including, of course, Steve Forbes, probably the most famous one of the bunch. Pat Buchanan, maybe the second most famous. But we also had Dr. Ben Carson on the show. Of course, he was in the recent Republican debates, which you probably saw. Those were like the highest rated debates ever. So anyway, we'll keep them coming. We are trying to get Donald Trump on the show. And also either Rand Paul or Ron Paul. Would love to hear from them. But yes, Wednesday we have a presidential candidate coming on to talk to us as well. So look forward to that. But today we're going to talk hardcore real estate stuff. We've got one of our clients, Jeff Morris, coming on the show, and he will be our guest today. But before we get to that, 2 big announcements. Well, one big announcement and one not so big announcement. How's that sound? The big announcement is we have our next Venture Alliance trip all planned out, and I tell you, I am so excited about that. Listeners, have you ever been to the East Coast for a fall foliage tour? And have you ever been to see the biggest mansions in the United States? Now, this kind of stuff exists in Europe, but there's only one place in the U.S. where you have these spectacularly opulent, incredible mansions. And yes, that is Newport, Rhode Island. That is where our upcoming Venture Alliance weekend is. It's our second Venture Alliance weekend. There's a lot of excitement about this, and that is at the end of September. And I'm working on this. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a side trip to Martha's Vineyard. I have never been to Martha's Vineyard. I've never been to Newport, Rhode Island either, but I've been on fall foliage tours. And let me tell you, it is spectacular. I know we have a lot of East Coast listeners. So if you want to come, if you've been thinking about joining the Venture Alliance, the only mastermind group built around, of course, fun, adventure, great trips, great camaraderie, lifelong friendships, creating deep bonds between people, but also on doing deals together. You can come as a guest, and our guest fee for our Newport, Rhode Island trip at the end of September, I believe the dates are September 25th, that weekend. I'm also going to do a side trip to Martha's Vineyard. Pretty sure, working on that, probably the Thursday before. So if you want to join me for that and the Venture Alliance weekend, you're welcome to. If you're thinking about joining, of course, you can do that at jasonhartman.com in the products section. But also you can come as a guest if you're not sure if you want to join, and we'll apply your guest registration fee to your membership. Again, guest fee for this one is $2,000, and the membership is, of course, still at its early bird price at $10,000 a year. I know if you're not used to these mastermind groups, that may seem high, but really it's cheap. I'm a member of a mastermind group where I pay $25,000 a year to join, and I got to tell you, if you asked me years ago if I thought I would ever be spending like $100,000 a year on memberships and stuff like this, I would have said you're crazy. But it's the New Country Club. It's where you get to meet with people and hang out with people that are doing big things, and it's aspirational, and that is so critically important. So check that out. Let us know if you're interested. I know there's been a lot of questions, a lot of interest about Venture Alliance, and I don't talk about it very much on the show, but again, that is our next event, so I hope you'll join us for beautiful, stunning, spectacular Newport, Rhode Island, and fall foliage. It's just going to be an awesome trip. So we're really looking forward to that. And then Jason Hartman University Live is coming up in San Diego on the other coast. See, we go coast to coast here, don't we? That's August 29th and 30th. This event is selling very quickly. We only recently announced it. We're in our second tier of early bird pricing. That's going to increase again at the end of the week, so you can get in on that. And again, here, this is a totally new event. It's 2 whole days. It's a whole weekend. We've had our Meet the Masters event for many years. We've had our Creating Wealth boot camp for many years. We've had our property tours for many years. But here we're doing more of a workshop format event where we're going to cover market analysis. How do you pick what market to invest in? We're going to talk about property analysis. How do you analyze a property from the land to improvement ratio, the rent to value ratio, the return on investment, the cap rate, the cash on cash return, and I think importantly, although I don't talk about it a whole lot, the debt coverage ratio. We're going to talk about property acquisition, creating a real checklist for how to analyze the property once you've purchased it or right before you purchase it. So what things you got to check off, what things you need to look for. And then we're going to talk about managing your manager versus self-management. And then overall property portfolio planning. We're also going to talk about land contracts. It looks like we've inked 3 special guests for this event. Number 1 is our land contract expert. He is flying out for the event. And now that we've got all the compliance issues, we didn't think some of the things he was talking about before were totally compliant with Dodd-Frank. Now that we've got that ironed out, I'm super excited. We've a lot of clients investing in the land contracts.
Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
But also, there is an opportunity, it's fairly limited, but there is an opportunity to do what we call ground floor deals too, where you can actually make some big capital gains. And so we'll talk about that as well. This is just going to be a great event. We're going to have our Chicago local market specialist fly out for this event. He will be speaking only on Saturday of the event. He doesn't think he can stay through Sunday. So we're going to have him come out. We're going to do some panels. And this is just going to be a great event. JHU Live. Of course, this is free for Venture Alliance members and early bird pricing for everybody else. And then if you want to write a review in iTunes, my ethical bribe here. Many of you have written reviews over the years, and we sure appreciate that. You reviewing the show in iTunes. If you want to write a review, just send me a screenshot to this email address. You ready? It's reviews@jasonhartman.com. Reviews@jasonhartman.com. Send a screenshot of your review, and we will email you back a promo code for a 30% discount. Hope that helps. And I hope you love it. And you know what? There is a lot going on in the real estate world that I want to talk to you about. We've got a bunch of articles to share with you. We're going to tease some of those up for the next episode. But at risk of me going long again, let's just get to our guest and let's talk to Jeff Morris. We're going to do a client case study here. We thank him for coming on the show and doing this. I think you'll learn a lot from it and enjoy it. So here we go. Hey, so I've got a caller on the line, one of our clients. It's Jeff Morris, and he's purchased in Memphis and Little Rock. I'm not sure anywhere else, but Memphis and Little Rock, and he's asking about Chicago. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great, Jason. Thank you.
Good. Hey, thanks for agreeing to come on the air so spontaneously, by the way. I asked you because I think a lot of listeners have the exact same question you asked me when I asked you if we could go on the air with it. So fire away.
So Jason, I'm looking to purchase 6 properties before year end. I'd like to simplify the process by using one provider and making my purchase in one marketplace. I just visited Chicago shortly after your visit. I like the dynamic economy there. The area just feels like it has a lot of energy, and I'm just trying to figure out if Chicago makes sense versus some other market in the country.
Yeah, Jeff, it's a great question, and here is the thing. I think it's, like anything in life, it's a two-edged sword. There's pros and cons to everything. But, look, Chicago is, and granted, these properties, of course, aren't in the city proper. They're in outlying suburban areas of Chicago. But, the Chicagoland area is, that's a world-class area. If you were to go to Europe and you were to talk to someone, a European person, about, the cities in America that they should go and visit or the cities they know about, they'd say New York, LA, Chicago. That'd probably be number 3. Maybe San Francisco, they'd say, is number 3. And then, you'd get down to some other cities. They might say Dallas, they might say Houston, they might say Seattle, etc. And forgive me for whichever ones I missed in that example, but you get the idea, okay? And so, I love that about it, and I think it truly is a hybrid market where you're going to have a lot more potential for appreciation than some of our more linear markets like Little Rock, Memphis, which have great cash flow. But in the things I do not like about Chicago is I don't like the high taxes. I don't like the, relatively speaking, landlord unfriendliness. And I think in those types of markets, you kind of have to know what you're doing a bit, or you have to be working with a very good team there. And one of the things you asked me, Jeff, off air is about our team and how you're looking to simplify and just use one local market specialist and execute on 6 more properties before the end of the year. And I think that's an awesome goal, by the way. Our Chicago provider is one of those that can really do that like an assembly line and make it very easy for you. They have, when we toured with them, everybody was just so impressed with their operation. And I don't know, did you go to their office, by the way, when you were there?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, had you gone to their office, you would have been totally impressed. You can see some pictures on our Facebook page, which is inside of Facebook, just type jasonhartman.com. I know that's kind of strange to have a website name inside of Facebook, but that is the name of our page. And there are some pictures from that tour there. And they've got a pretty impressive operation. They have in-house lending. They have in-house property management. They have in-house tax appeals. So one of the things you've got to be on top of there is, managing the rather high property taxes. They have a whole department that just does that constantly for their own properties and for their clients. And, that's a good feature. But, it is a city. Chicago is a world-class city. And so it does have a lot of energy, like you said. Some of those suburban areas are really charming. They've got nice main streets with, beautiful plantings and high-end stores and shops in them. And I got to tell you, I having been there many times myself, going again this time, I was pretty impressed. So I think you've got some real benefits there. You just got to know the pros and the cons. The cons being high taxes, landlord. Well, I'm not going to say landlord extreme unfriendliness. It's not California or New York. Probably not as bad as those, especially some of the cities like Santa Monica, San Francisco within those. But those are definitely two of the big cons. So when you look at your RV ratio, it's got to be a little better than you might expect in a market with lower taxes to offset that con side of the equation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, yeah. What's your, the cash flow figures in that RV ratio seems to be really positive in Chicago. Do you have any reaction to that and any sense of crystal ball into the future, how that marketplace might do versus Texas? Or
Well, I think here's my prediction about it. So that's another really good question, because it's one that people don't often, I think of properly the way they might balance what I'm about to say in their head. So I think in Chicago, and we say Chicago, of course, we're talking about Chicagoland. We're not talking about the city. We're talking about outlying suburban areas, okay? But we'll use the word Chicago generically. So in that area, you have pretty high rents, okay? Because, of course, you have some high incomes there. But I think that the RV ratios, the rent-to-value ratios, will actually decline there in coming years. Why do I think they'll decline? I don't think it's because rents will decline. I think it's because prices will appreciate more so than they do in some of the more linear markets. And rents always lag those. They always lag price increases historically by a pretty significant margin. Rents, they escalate, but they escalate more slowly than prices in hybrid or cyclical markets. Cyclical markets, they get left way behind. And that's why, some of the really expensive areas, South Florida, California, northeastern states, they'll just never catch up. Forget it. You're never going to have a good RV ratio in those markets. Even in the depths of the worst economy in 7 decades, in outlying Southern California areas like Riverside and San Bernardino, the RV ratios still didn't come into line with massive price declines. So I think the RV ratios will actually get worse in that area. But when you go in now and your basis is pretty low, you can afford to have that happen, and you might actually have some capital gains opportunities where you could sell and 1031 exchange those properties into more linear markets in the future if you wanted to. Or execute more quickly, Jeff, on the refi till you die plan. So, by the way, where do you live? I didn't ask you that.
I live in Newport Beach, California, your old stomping ground.
Oh, yeah, you're a California guy. So where in Newport do you live? What area?
Beachfront on the peninsula.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so you live in the party zone. Yeah, good. Good stuff. That's where it's happening. Yeah. Unless you're on the point, then it gets a little quieter there. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, the other thing I got a sense of, just got a sense from talking to the provider there, Jason, though, is they, thinking about vacancy rates and that sort of thing. I got a sense from talking to them, it's almost like non-existent. There's people lined up and waiting for these properties, and they got a real massive, if you want to call it blue collar, working class population that can afford the rents. Maybe they work for public transportation agency or just good paying jobs that allow them to afford $1,200, $1,500 a rent. So I don't know if you came away with any sense of that as well, but I really like the fact that there's such a large population there waiting for quality properties that are really desirable to live in, so that vacancy doesn't appear to be a big concern in that market.
Well, according to them, their average tenant stays 3.8 years. And that is pretty darn amazing. When we talk to people about, that want to buy apartments, and of course, I like apartments and I like single family homes, but if you can get a tenant on average to stay in an apartment for 1.5 years, you have bragging rights, okay? But in a single-family home in an area like that, yeah, I agree. That is possible. What it might mean, though, is that they're not pushing the rents high enough. Because if your vacancy rate is too low, that often is a sign that you're not charging enough. You don't want to have a super low vacancy rate, okay? Because there's a balance, in other words, there, right?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the particular provider I spoke with, they do 1-year leases, and they typically don't increase the rent because they think about the trade-off between potentially having a vacancy and then having to fill it again. And even though they do seem to have people lined up, but they seem to be reluctant to do price increases in general on rent during for tenants who stay in the property.
I know. I heard them say that too, and I don't know. I'm not so sure I agree with that, but turnover is one of the more expensive things you'll have when you're a property owner. So you definitely want to minimize turnover, but I think the psychology of rent increases, and of course it depends what's going on in the market at the time. So for example, if housing affordability is really low, then, those tenants aren't likely to go and buy something. If the rental market is really constricted and there's lines of people trying to get every property available in a market at a given time, then you can be more aggressive on rent increases. As I've said before, Jeff, my ideal is I want to see people try and get a 4% bump every year. But I know you can't always do that, okay? I can't imagine too many tenants are going to move if they're paying, say they're paying $1,300 a month. I mean, what kind of what kind of rental prices were you looking at some of those properties in Chicago?
$1,400 to $1,650.
Okay, so let's take a $1,500 property as an example. I mean, what if you were just to do a 2% bump and you raise it $30 a month? If it's 4%, it's $60. I can't imagine anybody actually moving for $30 a month. Don't you think they'd be more likely to give up HBO on their cable if their budget is really that constricted than actually move? I mean, the cost of moving, the cost of paying movers, you're undoubtedly going to have to buy a bunch of new stuff, have some damage, spend money on cleaning, spend money on this and that. I mean, it's just not worth the hassle. That's really what you do, is you try to raise your rents a comfortable amount where it's they might be a little annoyed about it, but it's not worth moving. You know what I mean? I think that I don't agree with them that you shouldn't raise the rent. I think a good landlord raises rents, Tenants will hate me saying that, but sorry, that's just the way it works, And some of our clients are starting to do 2-year leases as a more common thing, and you can build the increase into the 2-year lease too, or you can just make it a flat 2-year lease. But why would you see? I don't understand their psychology of saying they sign a 1-year lease and they don't raise the rent. Well, why don't you just sign a 2-year lease if you know you're not going to raise the rent? Just give them 2 years and lock them in,
Yeah, not to upset the apple cart, but what's your sense when the management company has a philosophy about how to work with tenants? You push, who's calling the shots? You're
calling the shots because you're the owner, but I will tell you, I think the one of our local market specialists, the one you're talking about, we have a couple of them in Chicago, but they've got a pretty awesome operation going, and they really do seem to know what they're doing. So I guess my answer would be, I would buy my properties and then I would evaluate it as I go. I mean, I cannot imagine a tenant in a $1,500 a month property moving for a 2 or 3% increase in the second year. Who's going to do that, really? Now, granted, if the rental market's really soft at the time, don't do it, okay?
So last question, Jason. If to try to simplify this process a little bit, I'm looking to do, I'll call it one transaction at one time. So this provider indicated they could bring me 6 properties at different locations, different price points, just to kind of diversify my purchase. Do you have any thoughts on buying a group of 6 at one time, just launching into a market like that all at once, and advantages any advantages I to gain out of the process by doing a group of properties at one time?
Well, the advantages are you're going to get it done. It's going to be easier to just sort of dedicate, look, this month or, in the next 45, 60 days or maybe 30, you're going to get this done, get it under your belt, and get out of the way. The disadvantage is if you make a mistake and you discover later that this wasn't your favorite market, you're going to be all in, so to speak, right? Rather than dipping your toe in the water. So it just depends, what you do for a living, and, whether you've got your own business or, you've got a corporate job, and what else is occupying you in your life. Because believe me, it feels like at least from my perspective, every time in my life when I try to save money, I always end up spending more, at least in my time, And so sometimes just getting things done is just, deploy. If you've got the money and it's not working for you now, you've got that opportunity cost on it, right? Until you're invested, that money is losing you money in the bank. So, there's the opportunity cost, and then there's the cost of your own time in managing the purchases, which, that sucks up some time. You're going to spend some hours on that, no question, especially if you're financing the properties. So the scalability of just getting it all done, there's definitely some benefit to that. But again, you have to weigh that against opportunity cost of what is that money doing now, and opportunity cost of taking time away from other parts of your life, whether it be your profession or your personal life. But I don't think you're going to make a mistake in that market. The only two real downfalls, I think, are the regulatory environment not being that friendly to landlords. Chicago is a mismanaged city. Okay. It's a left-wing environment. I don't like any of that stuff. I'll be the first to tell you. They've got financial problems like all lefty areas do. There's no surprise there. But heck, it's hard to dislodge a reputation, that's been developed over the years. Think about it. When you look around the U.S., Chicago is far and away the least expensive world-class city. You can't live in New York or San Francisco or LA for the kind of prices you can live in the Chicagoland area. Even in the outskirts of any of those places I just mentioned, it's not even a contest as far as cost of living and price. So, Chicago's kind of a Midwestern bargain, it's got a lot going for it. So tell me about the rest of your portfolio, just so I can evaluate the diversification. You said you had Little Rock and Memphis. How many in each of these markets?
So just this year, Jason, I purchased 2 properties in Little Rock. And those are, one I think was around $125,000. One was a little over $100,000. And then I have 2 in Memphis, Tennessee, all through one of the providers that we toured there with in that local market.
And is that it? Do you own your house in Newport Beach, or do you rent that one?
I own that home.
Okay, all right. So you own that one that you live in, and then you've got 4 other rental properties. No other rental properties in the portfolio?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so you're going to see like the sharpest contrast in the United States probably when you compare Little Rock, which is super landlord friendly, to Chicago, which is not as landlord friendly at all. Okay. So get ready for that one. It's going to be like whenever you face, and you eventually will, we all do, at some point in your ownership of those properties, if you hopefully keep them for 27.5 years, you're going to face a bad tenant in Little Rock and a bad tenant in Chicago. And it's going to be just like a totally, black and white experience, I bet. Just a totally different experience, opposite ends of the spectrum, So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Hopefully that's an interesting experience I have a long time from now.
Yes, or maybe you never have it. Would be ideal, but, and odds are you will. I'm just warning you in advance, okay? So good. Yeah. Yeah. Good. So, but I definitely wouldn't be doing more than 6 in Chicago, given your diversification. Okay. Because you're basically in 4 markets, including your Newport Beach non-investment property. And then when you go back to do more, maybe next year, do more in Little Rock or Memphis, or you could pick another market like Atlanta or a Texas market maybe, or something like that. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I appreciate that.
All right. So does that help you out?
Yes, very much. Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks for coming on the show, Jeff. And, I do want to say that I'm sorry I can't be I feel like I want to be really more definite about a lot of this stuff. But again, this stuff is a million shades of gray. It's never a black and white decision. I can't say green light Chicago, it's perfect. It's like human nature. There's lots of little frailties and little idiosyncrasies to it. And at some point you just got to kind of jump in and make it work, even if it's not the exactly right thing, Well,
it's 2 or 3 things that I heard about that local market that I found compelling. This market specialist was able to tell me the absolute lowest rent they've ever rented in a particular neighborhood within a certain parameter. And that number was great. It was within $50 of what they were telling me. And even if I got the lowest number, that'd be a great return, terrific results. And then the other thing about having people applying and teed up and lined up to rent your properties right away, just because that marketplace is so huge and so many people, that just gives you a sense of confidence that you're going to have a very good cash flowing property without a great deal of risk that it's going to sit vacant for a month or 2 months and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I just got to tell you one more thing. I know we're kind of extending our conversation, but I think this will be interesting. You've probably heard my mom on the show over the years a couple of times. She's been on maybe 4 or 5 times now, right? And this constant debate I have with my mother. Your family members never really listen to you completely, right? A total stranger will invest $1 million with me, no problem. My mom, if I could pry out, $100,000 to buy one property, I'll feel like I climbed Mount Everest, like it's a huge success, right? It's just a weird part of human nature again. And so, we all know that, right? And so, my mom always did the Southern California thing. And in the last several years, she did buy some properties through our network. And she bought one in Gulfport, right by her in Gulf Shores, Alabama. Okay. And she just rented her house in Canoga Park, which is in the Valley area of Los Angeles. And once again, my crazy mother, who loves to get behind the wheel of a car, drove herself. Now, she came and visited me in San Diego, then went up to Canoga Park, and I don't know, she doesn't mind driving. She likes to drive. She just loves going on a journey and an adventure. It's crazy. I mean, I say, my mom is an extreme do-it-yourselfer. But you know what? I kind of fight it and tease her about it, but in a way, it really keeps her engaged and active and involved in life. And I think that's a good thing, ultimately, especially at her age and so forth. And so, she rented that one, and then she goes, because she self-manages everything. She does not use a manager or anybody to help her with anything practically. I mean, every time she goes to one of her houses, her trunk of her car it's got tools. I mean, it's like amazing, right? It's crazy, right? So then, after the Canoga Park property, she goes to Gulfport, and she's working on renting that. She puts her signs out, on the corners, the little bootleg signs for rent, and just her phone number on it, and takes all the calls herself, and, all of that stuff. And I'm not suggesting this extreme self-management, but I do suggest another version of it we've talked about on the show. But here's what my mom said to me just the other night that was really interesting. She said, I just don't like renting these houses in these little towns. I just don't get enough action on them. I don't get enough calls. And she said, I put all these signs out and I've only had, a few inquiries on the property. And I said, Mom, hang on a second. The property in Canoga Park, Los Angeles area that you just rented, that one's worth, I think it's worth about $450,000, $500,000 maybe right now. Okay. And she rented it for somewhere in the ballpark of $2,500, 0.5 RV ratio. And I said, what's your property in Gulfport worth? And she says, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you pay for it? And she says, I think I paid about $140. So I asked the address. I looked it up on Zillow. It looks like it's worth about $125 according to Zillow right now. Okay. So, she bought it at the peak and it's gone down just a little bit. No big deal. Okay. But I said, what are you asking for rent? She goes, $1,175. And I said, Mom, look at this is the debate we've been having for years. You think you had such a success on your Los Angeles area house at a 0.5 RV ratio. If you put the Gulfport place up at 0.5, that means you'll be asking, what, $650? You'll have a line around the corner. It's all about ratios. It's not about the price. And so you obviously understand that. Try and get your family to understand. Good luck.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But to your point about Chicago, and that's why I mentioned that long explanation. To your point about Chicago, in that kind of market, you're going to have, you said it yourself at the beginning of this talk, there's a lot of energy, right? You're going to have a very vibrant mass market of a lot of people, a lot of service providers, a lot of contractors. So oddly, your repair costs will be very competitive. because there's more service providers competing for business in a bigger metro area, and you'll have a lot more tenants to choose from. So I think you're going to have a good experience there. I would do it, especially if you want to just knock 6 out quickly. I'm in favor. Okay.
Great. Well, that means a lot to me. Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate your business too. I'll stop the recording and then we can wrap up, okay?
I've never really thought of Jason as subversive, but I just found out that's what Wall Street considers him to be.
Really? Now, how is that possible at all?
Simple. Wall Street believes that real estate investors are dangerous to their schemes because the dirty truth about income property is that it actually works in real life.
I know. I mean, how many people do you know, not including insiders, who created wealth with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds? Those options are for people who only want to pretend they're getting ahead.
Stocks and other non-direct traded assets are a losing game for most people. The typical scenario is you make a little, you lose a little, and spin your wheels for decades.
That's because the corporate crooks running the stock and bond investing game will always see to it that they win. This means, unless you're one of them, you will not win.
And unluckily for Wall Street, Jason has a unique ability to make the everyday person understand investing the way it should be. He shows them a world where anything less than a 26% annual return is disappointing.
Yep, and that's why Jason offers a one-book set on creating wealth that comes with 20 digital download audios. He shows us how we can be excited about these scary times and exploit the incredible opportunities this present economy has afforded us.
We can pick local markets untouched by the economic downturn, exploit packaged commodities investing, and achieve exceptional returns safely and securely.
I like how he teaches you how to protect the equity in your home before it disappears and how to outsource your debt obligations to the government.
And this set of advanced strategies for wealth creation is being offered for only $197.
To get your Creating Wealth Encyclopedia Book 1, complete with over 20 hours of audio, go to jasonhartman.com/store.
If you want to be able to sit back and collect checks every month, just like a banker, Jason's Creating Wealth Encyclopedia series is for you. This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.